Hello and welcome to this presentation on how to eat the elephant, successfully implementing the Reliability Improvement Initiative. Now, as I'll explain in a bit more detail in a moment, this is more or less part one of the presentation, the main focus of changing the reliability culture of the plant. My name is Jason Tranter. I'm the Managing Director and founder of Mobius Institute. Now, first question we have to look at is, what is the elephant that we're actually trying to eat, metaphorically of course, and then we look at a few approaches and then what I think works. Now, of course, the typical answer when you ask the question, how do you eat an elephant, it is one bite at a time. And it's true, you look at the elephant, you look at this big project you've got, and instead of being intimidated by it and thinking, oh, how can I possibly take on that huge challenge, you need to break it up into lots of small manageable challenges, and that's part of what this is about. Just for a little laugh, no elephants were harmed during the development of this webinar. Okay, so let's make sure we all agree what it is we are trying to eat. What is the challenge we're trying to overcome here? We want to improve reliability in your industrial plant or in your facility, wherever it is that you work. To improve the reliability means it's the ability to run a plant with the lowest costs at the highest availability. We want to push the OEE up. We want to reduce our costs, and of course they're related. Some companies will just look at this cost issue and say, well, we need to reduce costs and do things that will ultimately impact the reliability sooner or later, in a negative way, that is. Anyway, that's the challenge we're trying to overcome, and there's a lot more we could say about that, but I've got other webinars on that topic. But what is the challenge we're trying to overcome? From another perspective, Reliability Web, and you're familiar with them, the people who originally organized this webinar, have published the uptime elements, and they've identified each of these elements are areas you need to address. So whether it's RCM, and as part of that, perhaps or separately, performing failure modes, effects analysis, vibration analysis, and dealing with lubrication and balancing, and planning and scheduling and spares management, etc. You can see each of those individual elements, and I can imagine some people may step back and say, wow, how do we tackle all of those things? Well, when trying to ask the question of how to eat the elephant, there really are two different approaches we could take. One is to just think literally, okay, well, we've got all of these we need to master, and we need to implement these programs, we need to make these changes, and so where do you start? And that would be a reasonable way to answer this question. But another way, and I think that it's more important, that you address the reliability culture in the plant, because there's no doubt you can get vibration analysis going, and you can do your RCM study, and you can try and do a few of these things. If you don't deal with the reliability and culture in the plant, you will make progress, but it will be, any gains will be hard fought, and it won't be sustainable. So this webinar is about what I think is the most critical issue. How do you get everyone within the plant pulling in the same direction, rather than pushing against you when you try to make these changes? But given that there is this question of how you do implement all of those things, I have recorded a separate webinar just like this one, where I address that issue. So please feel free to visit our website and you can see that one too. Okay, so very briefly, when you look at the question of how you improve reliability, you can sort of go through a process of just trying to analyze the reliability of your plant, looking at individual pieces of equipment, looking at the mean time between failure, and trying to identify your bad actors and so on. Now, identifying your bad actors is a good thing, but some people, in my opinion, focus too much on the analysis side, and I don't think that's the best use of time when you're when you've got reliability problems. We can also say, well, this is all a maintenance problem, so we'll just focus on maintenance, and that's not the answer either, because it's not all a maintenance problem. We can also say, hey, let's just monitor it. We'll get our vibration analysis and our ultrasound and infrared and all these different technologies, and we will monitor it, and when we identify problems, we'll react to those problems. Condition monitoring, hey, it's great. It's a part of the answer, just like that's a part of the answer, and that's a part of the answer, but the focus really needs to be on improving reliability, understanding why you don't have acceptable reliability, and focusing on how to improve it. Now, of course, there is a fifth strategy, which is followed a little bit too frequently, and we can just ignore it. And there is another approach too, and we can try and buy it. And there are lots of consulting companies out there that will say, hey, lay down a pile of cash and we will come in and fix it. Look, I have presented other webinars on this sort of topic, so I'm not going to dwell on it. I believe that the only solution is if the people within your plant have the reliability culture and have the skills to address all of these issues going into the future. Consultants can help you get there, but make sure that that's the goal, for your company to be in a position, your own staff, to be able to address these issues, not hope that someone can come in, fix a problem like they might fix a flat tire and then leave. Trust me, the tire will go flat again. Okay, so great question. How do we improve it? Now, okay, just asking that question can seem like it's a really big challenge. The first thing is you have to recognize the elephant. You have to understand the nature of the beast. So can you see the elephant there? Can you see it? Oh, maybe now you can see it. I pinched that from an ad, but I thought it was very effective given the topic. So we have to recognize, we have to get to know the elephant. We have to understand what it is we're dealing with so that we can address it and overcome the issues. We have to respect the elephant as well. It is a challenge. We don't want to take it lightly. We need to understand the benefits if we get it right and the ramifications if we get it wrong. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of individual elements that we can say, yes, we do need condition monitoring and the associated tools. We need precision maintenance, alignment, balancing, lubrication, and so on, and the associated tools. We need operators to know how to operate the equipment better. We need RCM and PMO, PM optimization techniques, and so on. You can see the list there. They are all important. But when we look at that, there is one big gap in the strategy. What have we forgotten? The people. And the trouble is there's too much focus on those things. And as I mentioned earlier, if you just focus on those elements, you won't get there. And that's our problem. We feel like we're one person against many, that they're all resisting the change. They like the status quo perhaps, or you may think they do. And so you may feel, okay, how do I overcome this challenge? Why is it just so hard to address these sorts of issues? We know that it makes good financial sense to make these sorts of changes, whether it's condition monitoring or changing the way we lubricate machines or store spare parts and so on. We know it all makes sense. We know that at the heart of it, the essence of improving reliability is easy to grasp. You just have to look at the way most people maintain their car. If they have any interest in reducing the costs of ownership, they will change the oil, and they won't use used oil or something like that. They will use the correct oil. They will do things with their car so that it lasts longer, and that's what we should be doing inside the plant as well. So, and we know that everyone benefits. Now, there might be some people, and this is what we'll talk about, who you may feel, well, will they benefit? Well, I would argue that the majority, if not all people, will benefit if reliability is improved and the challenge is to understand that and make sure that everyone understands it. But the fact is that we know all those things, but we're still getting this. We're getting that from the senior managers, we're getting that from people around us, and we're getting that from the shop floor, operators, craftspeople, and so on. You know, if you just try to say, we got to change these things, then it's like, you know, I don't like change. We're getting pushback. We're getting people who are skeptical about, oh, another change is what's flavour of the month and so on. And we also get some people, and you know, forget his particular environment, you know, they're just not listening. So let's look at some of these cultural issues. You know, what is the attitude of maintenance and operations staff? One, and we'll pose a number of questions soon, but you know, are they rewarded for unreliability right now? You know, when a person comes in at 2 a.m. or you know 2 p.m. on a Sunday or whatever, they get paid extra. People pat them on the back. Oh, good on you for coming in and getting this machine up and running, and oh, you're the only one that can do it. You know, they're rewarded for lack of reliability. So how important is reliability to them? But to ask the other side of the question, does anyone even ask them their opinion, not just about reliability, but their opinion on why the machine failed in the first place? What could be done differently to avoid future failures? You know, too often they're seen as the people who are, you know, perhaps even causing the problem, or you know, the solution in terms of patching it up and getting running again. But when we start to think about root cause failure analysis and thinking about what we need to change, wouldn't that person be a good person to go and ask? But does anyone ask that person? And anyway, are they given the correct tools to do the job properly, the time to do the job properly, and the training so that they can use those tools properly and understand, you know, what is important? Culture change is the key to reliability improvement. Now, when I use the word culture change, it can be particularly potentially a sticky topic. I'm talking about the reliability culture in the plant. Are people focused on how they can improve reliability? People can take pride in their work. Now you have to ask the question what it's like in your particular plant. But in plants where reliability is important, people do take pride in their work. They can get it right the first time. It's not just a case of quickly patch up the machine so we get it running with the idea we'll fix it properly later. Well, I was going to say later never comes. Later only comes because that's when it fails again and we're back patching it up again. The truth is that they won't feel threatened. They will change their focus from reactive work to reliability improvement work. That's the key of all of this. It's not that, you know, if we get rid of all the reactive problems, that we don't need those sorts of mechanics and electricians and so on anymore. They just will work on reliability improvement tasks instead. What is the attitude of senior management? You know, do they truly appreciate the value and importance of improving reliability? Have they made reliability a priority? Have they provided the required funding? Now, that's a tricky one right there. What you really need is someone at the top, and I apologize, I'm using a guy, could have been a woman, but that senior person needs to say reliability is critical to the success of this organization. You have to put it right up there next to safety to say it is critical to the success of the organization. Everyone must be adequately trained and equipped to improve reliability. So everyone can do their jobs properly in a precision way, and everyone understands what they do and how it relates to reliability, whether they're in the design group, procurement, or wherever, all the way down to people operating the machines and maintaining them and reinstalling bearings and overhauling equipment and so on. Okay, so the key is here. You know, the key is with the people who operate the machines and who work on the machines, but it is also here. and it's here, it's in the storerooms, and it's with the operators, and it's with the plant management, and it's with reliability engineers and people who maintenance managers and condition monitoring leaders, and all of those people. But it's especially there, and I say it's especially there because they are potentially the people who, whether they're in operations or maintenance, that are going to have the greatest direct impact, and potentially they are the ones who feel the most jaded on the one hand and potentially skeptical and threatened on the other hand, and so they may be the hardest to win over. But you will have to sort of look at your plant and see whether you think that is true or not. The fact is, everybody needs to be won over. Everyone has to value reliability. That doesn't work. You may wish everyone was a robot and you could just say, do it this way now. Most people, if they've been doing it one way and you tell them to do it another way, they're going to feel defensive, they're going to feel potentially threatened, they're going to question why you're telling them to do that. As far as you're concerned, you may feel you have the authority to do that. Well, it doesn't work. Nor does that, but I'm just having fun. Nor does that. Now, the idea there, the Lone Ranger, the one person who says, I'm going to get on my white stallion and I'm going to make sure that everyone in the plant does what I think should happen, and I'm going to try and change the world. Sorry, Lone Ranger, you just can't. You have to do it as a team. Everyone has to work on this together to really make a sustainable reliability improvement initiative. Every Lone Ranger can make a few improvements here and there, but it's frustrating work and it doesn't really achieve the total goal. And that doesn't work either. Now, reason for that picture, it's sort of like stealth mode. It's the person who thinks, well, I'm going to make some changes, but I'm going to try and fly under the radar. That may be a good way to get things started. It can be helpful to get some runs on the board, so to speak, to make some changes, show the value in making those changes, document what you do, and then you can go to management and say, hey, listen, we just did this and saved this money. And maybe you do a couple of projects and we did that and we saved money. And there's a lot more where that came from. So, hey, senior management, how about we step this up a level and do what we really need to do instead of just taking on a few small projects. But in terms of successfully implementing our long-term sustainable project, you can't just keep flying under the radar. It just won't work. It just won't work for a whole lot of reasons. It is all about the people. It is about all of the people. You have to bring them all along this journey with you. So, let's just step back for a second. I'm going to go through a whole lot of little topic areas, and I guarantee that not one of them will be something that, well, I very much doubt it's something that you would never have considered before in your life or thought about personally. But the challenge here is that you have to consider these issues in terms of the people within your plant, and then think about how you're going to try and roll out this reliability improvement initiative. Number one, people fear losing their job. Anything you do that they think threatens their job, they're going to be very defensive, of course. They're not going to support that sort of an initiative. They can't provide for their family. They have to go through that embarrassment of failing. They just don't want to do that. People also fear losing their benefits. If they've been getting overtime pay and as a result they've bought themselves a nice shiny boat, they can take the family out boating or not, but people don't like to lose that overtime pay. People don't like to lose that firefighter reward, that pat on the back when you are the one that goes out, or they are the one that goes out and does the emergency work and gets the plant running again. That's all rewards. And, you have to ask this question yourself, but sometimes there's a certain amount of flexibility, I'm trying to think of a better word, but where people have a lot of free range to choose the jobs they want and when they're going to work on them and all that sort of stuff. They might think, hey, this is all pretty good. I like working the way it is now. Well, the bottom line is that unfortunately all those things do have to go. They do. They just do. But if you just try and take them away and somehow say, well, there will no longer be overtime pay and there's no longer a pat on the back and you no longer have flexibility, you will receive lots of resistance to that. Lots of resistance. You just don't want to approach it that way. Even though that is going to be the outcome, you just can't approach it that way. So, what else do we know about people? People with power don't like to lose that power. So, you might have a person who thinks they're really, really special because they are the only ones that know something, know how to repair a particular piece of equipment or whatever. If you threaten that by training other people, they might think, well, wait a minute, I'll lose my status. They may be the only person that have that knowledge. They may have some sort of seniority which makes them feel like they are the ones that should be dictating things. But also, if you've got a supervisor, for example, and that person has a group of people working underneath them, they may feel that if reliability is improved, that group will be made smaller, and that can be threatening as well. And people certainly don't like to be told that everything they have been doing is wrong. If you've been doing things a certain way, whether it's the way equipment's operated, maintained, the spares that have been purchased, the way parts have been procured and so on, if you're told, well, that was wrong, it's not a good message. That's not the way to tell someone. And at the end of the day, no matter what we are really like, there's always a tendency to just say, what's in it for me? Okay, you want to make a change, you want to do something in this plant. Well, at the end of the day, what is in it for me? It's not that everyone's greedy or something like that, but you do have to answer that question, But we have to go deeper, Sometimes when you ask the question, what's in it for me, you can just very quickly say, oh, they just want more money, or they just want to do as little work as possible. You can be very cynical about how you answer that question. Psychological studies, surveys, you name it, repeated in every industry, up and down, show that, those sorts of issues of salary are not what is most important on people's minds. They want respect, they want independence, and a lot of other things that I'll talk about now. They want to feel trusted. They want respect. They want to work in a place that is fair, where they feel they are being treated fairly and fairly compared to everyone else. They like to feel like there's some purpose to the work that they're doing. Everyone likes to feel that they have some control over what they're doing and not just be constantly told to do this or do that. People like a bit of control. People like a bit of certainty, not to sort of think, well, tomorrow things might change again. In a month, things might change again. It really is a comforting feeling to be able to look off into the future and say, okay, I will be doing this for some time. I can plan, I can therefore buy a house or whatever. There's also the desire to be part of a community. You can look through societies and see how people band together for all kinds of reasons, whether it's sporting clubs or even gangs. There's a sense of community that people want, and you need to give that to them and not threaten that community either. And people also like accountability, to feel that they're responsible for something, but that other people are also responsible, and if they don't pull their weight, if they don't do what they should do, well, they will be held accountable. So let's look at those in a little bit more detail. Generally speaking, people prefer to decide what to do instead of just being told what to do. Now, sure enough, there are some employees that just say, whatever, you want me to do this, you want me to do that, just tell me and I'll go do it. But generally speaking, particularly the people who will probably put up the most resistance to what you want to do in terms of culture change, they are the same people who would much, much, much prefer to decide what to do rather than being told what to do. There's the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You've got to make the horse want to drink. You've got to make the horse thirsty. The horse will drink. And this to me is one of the key messages out of this whole webinar. You need to create the desire to change, and then ideally go a step further and say, well, hey, how do you think we should implement that? In other words, you want them to understand what the plant and what the company would be like if reliability was improved. What's going to happen, how safe it is, how economically viable the plant is, how there's less stress, so much less reactive work, they can take pride in their work, and all these other things, and we'll address a bunch of those in a moment. You want to show them that and say, that's what we all want, isn't it? That is achievable. That's what we want. Okay, and once that job is done, how are we going to get there? What is it that is stopping us from getting there? Now, you may know what is stopping us. You may think you know. And particularly if we went back to the list that I had up before, or even the uptime elements, you'll see there's elements in there where we've got to understand failure modes and things like that. Well, you can all sit in a room and try to figure that out, but there are people in your plant who work with those machines every day, and they know what's wrong with them. So and why equipment fails and so on. They know a lot more than you may think they do. You just got to ask them, and people love to be asked. So that brings up this point. People like to be asked for their opinion. People might be cynical at first. That's why you got to be consistent with all these things. But if you say to the person, "Hey, explain to me why something's wrong. Explain to me, why it's set up properly. Explain to me why it fails," and you listen and then you act. So, they gain respect when you ask them that question. They know they matter when you ask them a question about something. They want to know that they're respected. But a really key point, don't just ask them for their opinion. You have to do something with that information. Now, there's really one of two things that you can do. You can implement the change that they've asked for. And sometimes these changes can be really minor. Really minor things. It can make a difference to them and can make a difference to production and reliability. And so sometimes it's so easy. You might think, oh, this is just a small thing, and look, you can get over it, and but imagine the difference it makes to someone when they suggest we should change this, and then in a very short time you're there and saying, okay, we are changing it, and you've listened and you've acted. And sometimes they're bigger things, sometimes they're smaller things. Now, if you can genuinely say there is a good reason not to follow their suggestion, perhaps it's because there's just something that they don't realize what the ramifications are of that particular change. There might be reasons why it is the way it is. But you go back to them and you say, hey, look, great suggestion. We see what you're trying to get at, but this is the reason we can't do anything. And if it's explained to them, they say, oh, okay, I hadn't ever thought about it that way. Well, that's fine. They don't feel like they're being ignored. They realize, well, this is just something we have to deal with. It's nothing we can control. It may also be that you can't get the budget to change it. But go back to them and say, look, I'm sorry. I really appreciate your suggestion, but we've also got this other list of suggestions, and wouldn't you agree that from a priority point of view these things have a higher priority, and therefore we do want to get to them, but management haven't just sort of opened a blank check and said spend whatever you want. Anyway, bottom line is show them that and this isn't some fake thing. You genuinely show them that you value the opinion and explain either why you can't follow it or follow it, and you'd be amazed at the difference. People like to be rewarded and recognized, but the nature of the reward is important. It's interesting. It's another one of these psychological things. Think just for a moment, if someone from work came to you and said, would you help me this weekend? I really need your help, but I'm moving house, and they know you've got a truck or something. Could you help me for a couple of hours? Come over, you know, load up your truck, we'll drive it over there, you know. So, and you think, okay, I will help you. And there's a million possible scenarios just like that, where you are volunteering your help and the person is grateful to you and everything else. Now imagine if that person came to you and said, hey, I will give you $50 if you come over and help me move my stuff for 2 hours on Saturday. That suddenly changed everything, didn't it? It's like, oh, wait a minute, you're going to pay me $50 to come over and spend 2 hours, and I know it's going to take more than 2 hours, and I'm going to be driving my truck, probably my fuel. I'm going to be helping you. I'm going to be, you know, tired afterwards. I might even hurt my back. You know, it changed the whole dynamic completely. And that's the thing. You know, people like to be rewarded, but not necessarily just with money. You know, it can be just, you know, gratitude and recognition. So imagine, for example, if inside a plant, let's consider 3 scenarios. You know, one is where you say, you know, well, certainly there's the situation where you ask for someone's help and to make recommendations, but you never follow their recommendations. You don't give them any feedback. Well, that's obviously not going to be good. Everyone wants to help, but you know, when they don't get any feedback, any sort of thanks or anything, that stops pretty quickly. Imagine another scenario at the other end where management says, I tell you what, we really need your help, but what we're going to do is we've got this suggestion box, or however you want to implement it. Write down your ideas, put them in here, and we will reward you in proportion to the difference it makes to our business. So, if you make a suggestion that just, you know, saves a little bit of inconvenience or increases production by just a little fraction or whatever, we will give you a small reward. On the other hand, if you can come up with a suggestion that, you know, increases production by 5% and, you know, saves the whales and everything else, we'll give you a really big reward. Well, you send those people away. Who wants to make the small suggestions anymore? All those little small suggestions add up to big changes. But who wants to make that anymore? What you're telling them is, oh, the small suggestions don't actually matter that much, you know. So everyone's sitting there going, well, we could do this. Oh, that's, you know, small. We could do that. What's the idea that's really going to be big? They're looking for that idea that, you know, knocks the ball out of the park. Well, of course, people don't come up with those ideas, and it has been shown, you know, this has been repeated many times, you don't get many suggestions. Whereas if you have some simple reward system, and particularly some sort of recognition, you know, some board somewhere, hey, you know, Fred made this suggestion, Sally made that suggestion, etc., you know, they get some sort of reward. It may not be financial, it may be financial, but it's small and it's meaningful, and it's not just some token sort of throwaway thing. It's meaningful, and so people have an emotional reason for wanting to do it, and you know, and those small ideas that really do make a difference, particularly when they add up, well, you get more ideas, you get more ideas, you get more ideas, and you know, if you want to go back to study Japanese culture and the Toyota way and all that, this is all part of that. It's just, but you know, you don't have to do it just because it, you know, the Japanese way and all that sort of stuff. It is just simple common sense. If you can motivate people to make suggestions that help them and help you, they will do it if the reward is in place to do it. But another little thing, you know, that people don't like others to take their credit. You know, if you do implement something like this, but then you walk around patting yourself on the back and my reliability initiative has made all these changes, you know, you'll get a lot of people crossing their arms behind you thinking, that's so-and-so, he's taking credit for all of our hard work and all the things we've done. So you need to make sure that the person who makes the suggestions is rewarded, and if you are a leader, you have to lead from behind. You have to push your team forward and put them in the spotlight, not yourself. Another one, people prefer managers who walk the walk. It's no good saying, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that, and then not, doing it yourself. You've got to do, managers should do what they said they would do. They have to act how they said we should act. In other words, if you're telling people you've got to act in this frugal way or a lean way, or just generally making these changes to improve reliability, you've got to act that way yourself. You can't do things then that are contrary to what you've asked them to do. And a key part of that is that if you said you were going to do something, that you follow up. You don't just make those hollow suggestions and hollow offers to do something and then not actually do it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this isn't necessarily for everyone, but there are an awful lot of people who like that independence. They like to feel they've got some control over what they're doing. It means a lot. It shows you respect them. When you say to someone, well, okay, you work with your group of guys and you make those changes, you instigate the new measure, you come up with these ideas, those things that give people some responsibility. Now, you can oversee it, but again, you don't sort of slap them around when they don't do it exactly the way you would have done it. It's all about all the other parts of this presentation, making sure they've been given an opportunity. Sometimes it may be necessary to say, whoops, that didn't quite work, but you do it in a tactful way so that they retain their dignity and they'll be ready to keep trying and keep making improvements. You slap someone down and they're not necessarily going to want to get up, or if they do, watch out. But it shows you trust them and it gives them some control. Now, as I say, there are some people who want that, but those same people are probably the ones that will resist any changes in reliability because of the practices that will need to be changed. And I mentioned this briefly earlier, but people like to know what they do matters. So on the one hand, you can look at a person's role in the organization, whatever it is, people want to know that matters. But same from a reliability point of view, if they are going to make a change, it's much better if they think that it matters. And there's another point I'll make soon about teamwork. It's all a part of the same sort of thing. Doing things that matter makes them feel more important. Makes them sort of feel more passionate about what they're going to do. They can feel that they're part of the solution, not the problem that's being solved, that they're all working together instead. And they can take pride in their work. And that's a huge one. You have to ask the question, if you see someone, for example, working on a machine and you think, well, that may not be the best way to lubricate the bearing or install the bearing or, whatever it is, your thought may be that they're doing it that way because they don't care. And there may be people who really just don't care. It's like, I just got to do this job so I can, get home. But in the majority of cases, people do like to take pride in their work. They like to think, I am doing a good job. But if they're in an environment where they're never being given time to do a good job because it's always this pressure, get that bearing in there because we've got to get the plant started again. We can't delay anymore. That's just such a negative way to do things. If you say you've got to do it in a precision way and that person says, well, I need a particular tool, and you don't give it to them, or they may not want to admit that they don't have the training to do it properly. People need the training. People need the tools, people need the time and the support to do a job properly. And when people can take pride in their work, of course that level of work will go up, tenfold. And this is another important one. People like to be on a team, fighting a common cause. Now, I'm not saying that you have to sort of paint reliability like they're the real bad guys and we have to sort of fight those bad guys and they're the huge enemy or something. But there's no doubt that when people team together and realize that it's them against this problem, because that problem is actually affecting them in a negative way, then people, are far more likely, on the one hand, to work together toward that goal, but also less likely to resist the movement. If as an individual you can see that everyone's trying to move down this new path, and you're the one resisting it, well, you're more likely to join the team, or in a worst case scenario you decide, hey, I'm going to leave because this just isn't for me. And that may not be a bad thing, and that is quite common. People just don't like this movement and they say, it's not for me, I liked it the old way. Well, there's other places for that person to go and work. We're not trying to push them out, but there is a new way to do things, and most people will enjoy that way. Everyone pulling together because people like to make progress. But you don't know you're making progress unless you see signs of that progress. Now, over a longer period of time, people may be able to say, you know what, we used to have a lot more breakdowns, didn't we? And we didn't seem to produce quite as much of the product. And, you don't want people to have to sort of reflect back in time to think for themselves that there's been an improvement. You need to know that progress is possible. They need to know what success looks like, and they need to know, well, that other companies have done it with people just like them, but also they need to be reminded along that journey that they are making that progress. So key one there is you need a way of recording these KPIs and feeding them back to people to say, guess what we've achieved this month. Now, think about the safety initiative. All these things that I've talked about really relate to the same sorts of changes that had to go on there. People can see the need to improve safety perhaps a little easier than they can see the need to improve reliability. But either way, when you can see the statistics about how many days we've been operating without lost time due to an injury and those sorts of things, that all gives positive feedback that these changes that they've made have been positive. Well, we have to do the same thing with reliability as well. There's no doubt there's going to be some KPIs we manage that, well, may not translate all that well to every individual in the plant. So part of what you've got to do is think, well, okay, which KPIs would be more meaningful, and record them and give that feedback. I mean, think about having a newsletter. Imagine a newsletter that goes out to the employees to say, guess what, we made this progress, we made that progress, this suggestion came in from this person and we made that change, this suggestion came in from that person, we made that change. Maybe you say, oh, unfortunately we fell back a bit in this area, but blah blah, this is what we're doing to make some improvements. You've got to keep this fresh and alive. It doesn't matter what you do. As the days go by and the weeks go by and the months go by, people can easily forget it. That goes for senior management, and every other person that works in the organization. Something like a newsletter works really well, so that they can see the progress and so that it's kept alive. One other point, people do like to be held accountable. If you're going to say these are the goals we have, a lot of people really do. When you look at surveys to say what really drives sort of enjoyment in work and feeling of self-worth and all of that, it is that question of accountability. But as part of that, people also like other people to be held accountable. They don't want to see that, well, there were certain goals that were supposed to meet and they were supposed to change their practices. They didn't, they haven't done anything, and nothing's really come of it. So, these are all challenges. It doesn't mean that the people who don't reach their goals, have a big stick whacked across their hands or something, We don't do that anymore. But there are other ways to, number one, address that issue and demonstrate to others that you are addressing that issue, whether that's additional training or even change in staff or whatever. People want to see that the management is serious about this. And of course, people at the end of the day don't like 2 a.m. emergencies. They don't like being dragged out on a Saturday afternoon. They don't want to have to miss their kid's soccer game or whatever it is. Those emergencies, yep, there are some people who are rewarded because they get a big pat in the back and they get a bit of overtime. But generally speaking, most people, the vast majority of people, and again there's been surveys and all of this, would much rather know that they can go home at the proper time, on Friday afternoon, and know that they won't be back until Monday morning. They won't expect any 2 a.m. calls. They can plan on seeing the kids' soccer game and going away fishing for the weekend or whatever it is. Another little point is, people like to mentor. Now, obviously this doesn't apply to everyone, but there will be people in the organization who know a lot. Now, of course, it could be about operating equipment, it could be maintaining equipment, it could be a range of topics. But again, you can turn this into an opportunity for someone to pass on their vast experience and knowledge, recognize what they know, and say, create an environment where they feel like, someone who is really contributing and passing on their experience so that it isn't wasted when they leave the organization. I mean, what's the point of someone retiring with all this knowledge? Now, sometimes there's a question when it comes to this. Are people actually willing to do that? And do they lose power? Do they have some knowledge that makes them sort of powerful for some reason? And if they teach someone else, well, what's so special about them? Because now everyone knows how to get a machine running again or whatever. Again, surveys, all that sort of thing. Generally speaking, people prefer to pass on their knowledge, and particularly when they retire, they would see it was just such a waste to leave with all that knowledge. And you hear it all the time. People say, why didn't the organization capture my knowledge? Why didn't they get me to mentor others within the organization so that knowledge lived on? What a waste. What a waste. And last but not least, people get sick of flavor of the month fads. We're doing Six Sigma, we're doing Lean, we're doing TQM. Don't try and create a reliability improvement program where you put some fancy name on it and you print up mugs and you wear special hats and people go, here we go again. What is it this month? You just don't want to do it that way. It's reliability improvement. Now, you may utilize elements of Lean and Six Sigma and so on. You may. And there's all of these things. They relate to a lot of the same core issues about how equipment is run and how people treat them and cleanliness and, eliminating waste. It's all really, really simple stuff. You don't have to put some special label on it and try to create a bunch of false rah-rah. What you need to do is again lead the horse to the water so that the horse is thirsty and say, this will be the difference in your lives if this plant operates more reliably. You don't have to use these special things. Apart from anything else, people want certainty. They don't want to think, okay, well now we're going to trot along and do this Lean thing, and in a couple of months, everything that we did will be cast aside because some manager's going to come in and we're going to go off down some other path and focus on something else. I mean, that just doesn't help. They want it to make sense. It needs to be understandable, and they need to see the reason for it. If it makes common sense, then most people will go along with it. They want clarity in what they're doing. This is the plan. This is why we're doing it. Great. And this isn't for the next month. This isn't for the next 6 months. This is forever. Safety was forever. Reliability needs to be forever. Now, you may be saying, will this work for everyone? Is this for everyone? Is everyone going to respond in the way that you want? Well, the truth is not everyone will change. Everyone, not everyone will come along on this journey. I hate using that word, but everyone needs to be given the opportunity to come along. You need to say, this is where we're headed. This is why. Create that desire to follow this new path. See the logic in doing these things. See why it matters. If nothing else, for the viability of the plant. Everyone can come on that journey, but recognize that not everyone will, and a lot of those people will just quit and go find somewhere where they can just work the way they used to work. And as you know, there's plenty of places like that. So what do we have to do? Number one, you have to believe. You can't pay lip service to this stuff. If you listen to what I've just talked about and cynically thought, oh yeah, bullshit. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that in a webinar, should I? If you think it's a lot of rubbish, if you think it's psychobabble or something like that, and that people just need to be told what to do, well, you probably, quit listening some time ago. What is true is that people are the key to improving reliability, and your people can do it. Absolutely, positively, it has been done. It has been done. What I can tell you is that I'm lucky. I get to meet with a lot of people in a lot of countries, in a lot of industries, and I can tell you that I have never seen it work where it wasn't driven by the people, and that where the people were engaged and made these changes. And I can also say that I have seen so much money and effort and equipment purchased and training courses run and everything else, and because this issue wasn't addressed, it came to nothing. And when I say nothing, yes, there can be small improvements made, but those improvements, were they long lasting? You bought laser alignment equipment. Is it sitting in the shelf now? You bought vibration equipment. I've seen so many plants. They buy vibration equipment. They get trained up. They do a bit. They make some progress, and before long they said, vibration didn't work for us. And then one day there's a terrible failure. Oh, we need vibration analysis. That would have warned us. And they start doing it again and again. I've seen cycles over the past 30 years, 3 times, and there's probably been more in some places. But that's because, for the most part, you've got one champion and a whole lot of people who just don't get it. They just don't get it. And when you go to the maintenance, the planners and so on, if they even exist, to say, well, this work needs to be done, it's sort of like, yeah, look, when Bruce from the plant comes to me and says he can hear the bearing screaming, then we'll act. But until then, we're running the plant. You can only put up with that sort of stuff for so long. And of course, that's a more extreme case. Anyway, moving right along. So, once you're convinced, you need to develop a plan. So you start by saying, where are we? How do we look against our best production period? How do we look against other companies in our industry? You do that the gap analysis to see what the opportunities are, and you establish what the KPIs are going to be, so that when you start making these changes, you can say, right, well, this is what we were in October 2014, and this is how we've progressed since then. And then you're going to ideally gain leadership support right there and then. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you may need to do a few stealth projects first, get a little bit of funding, go and get that a few runs on the board, show the value of it, but you won't be successful in the long run unless you gain and retain, maintain that leadership support. You've got to have them on your side. You've got to sell on the fact that you will reduce costs, you will increase availability, you will reduce the risk, and you will reduce the number of safety and environmental incidents. And those issues are important to them. Don't go into vibration levels or anything too technical. those issues right there are what's important. Then you need to start the education process, and this can take a lot of different approaches. What can I say? It's main thing I mean is that it doesn't mean you get a company like ours to come in and spend a few days and do a big presentation and course on this stuff and think that that's going to do it. And it isn't sending a couple of guys off to a conference and thinking that's going to do it. And it's not sending a couple of people off to a RCM course, and just taking a little piecemeal approach. Every little bit helps. But what you've got to do is just think into the future and say, what will I know in 6 months, in 12 months? Where will we be? How do we get everyone on board? So you do need the internal knowledge to address these things. But as I've said in other presentations, it's not rocket science. It's just not. You need to address the skill shortages. Do people really know how to install the bearing? Now, you don't go to them and ask them, and you don't watch someone install the bearing and slap them when they do it incorrectly. You say, here's an opportunity. We're going to provide some training on why the bearing needs to be installed properly and how to do it. And there might be some people with their arms crossed saying, I know how to install a bearing, but by the end their arms will be uncrossed and they'll say, oh geez, I didn't know that. I don't remember being trained on that 30 years ago, or even if it's 13 months ago. There's a big question over some of the training and whatnot. Anyway, the main point is this one, the buy-in. You need to create the pull, and that's really where you've got to start. You need to address the senior management and people up and down the plant to say, this is what we're striving for, and these are the sorts of things we're going to do. You need to demystify all these things to do with condition monitoring and everything else, and then people will be more receptive to take on the knowledge and skills they need. And as part of that, but as an ongoing thing, you need to build those relationships. You need to ask questions, act on it, educate people, and provide feedback, as I mentioned earlier. And then you can look at implementing. Now, I mentioned earlier that I split this presentation up into two parts, the people issues and the actual practical steps. And this is the sort of thing. It's planning and scheduling, condition monitoring, PM optimization, defect elimination, operator-driven reliability, root cause failure analysis, so that you can go back and do all this again. There's more to it. As I say, there's another movie on that subject. It is all very important. The bottom line is you will need a reliability strategy. You will need to be able to decide what do you let fail, where can you use condition-based maintenance, where do you use interval-based maintenance. And as part of that, there is a process you need to go through to understand what are your assets, what's the criticality, what are the failure modes, and out of all of that we just make these decisions. Then, based on that, we can say, well, what changes do we need to make to the design and procurement process, to the inventory management, spares management, and so on, planning and scheduling, precision skills, operator care, practical root cause failure analysis, and I'll get back to that in a second. I'm rushing through this because the other presentation talks about this in more detail. But remember, as per what I've just said, you've got to have this stage one in place before you bother trying to do all these other things. The leadership, the vision in place so everyone knows where we're going, address these questions to do with human nature and human error and this culture change issue that we've talked about most of this webinar, and therefore the training, from the top to the bottom. And we can't just do it once. We have to realize this is an ongoing process. So, we learn through root cause failure analysis, but we continue the communication, we track our KPIs, we report on our KPIs, and we just keep improving this. So, wrapping it all up, we've tried to identify what the elephant is. Don't fight the elephant. You can't beat the elephant by yourself. You need to work with the elephant. Don't let that elephant become your master and poo all over you. It is a manageable process, and I do not know what that person is doing. I just don't know, but I wanted to put it in my slides anyway. So, in my previous presentation, the 5 elements of a successful reliability improvement initiative, I talked about the need for education, having a plan, developing a plan through that education process, and achieving the buy-in, which gives you the senior management support, which gives you that that long-term view. Because you got the management on board, everyone sees where we're going. You have to have the patience. You need to achieve the buy-in. That puts you in control of your future of the plant. On the one hand, you're not relying on other people to come in and try and fix this for you, because they will leave and you'll fall right back to where you were. It happens again and again. On the other hand, you're not in control of your future. The plant is. All of those machines and electrical equipment that fail and cost excessive amounts of money and create safety incidents and so on, that's in control. You need to put yourself in control. And the key to all of it is having that reliability culture. You need to treat people like humans and think to yourself, how would you feel if you were put in their position? And it just goes round and round. You need to continue the education process, keep everyone informed, new employees, contractors, refresh everyone's education and knowledge about this, keep the momentum going, and that keeps the senior management support, etc., etc. We can keep going around. Okay, well, I apologize this took so long, when I get talking, but I really hope that you've found this useful. This issue of improving the reliability culture of the plant, to me, as I've said, is the key issue, and to me it's the issue that most people struggle with. It is the hardest one to deal with. You need to address it, and I think there are some very straightforward ways to deal with it. It's just through education. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to this presentation. I'll just say something salesy just for a moment now that I've finished the educational part. That's what iLearn Reliability was designed for. Now, I don't want you to think that just because we are a training company, I therefore see everything through the eyes that education is the only answer. But education is the only answer, and that's why we created the product. For 30 years I've seen companies just struggle with this, either ignore it altogether or just struggle with it, take a real piecemeal approach to training, and they never get on top of it. It's only the companies that really treat it seriously, and what they have had to do is develop a lot of in-house training, which is expensive and time-consuming and generally not where their expertise lies. It's right here. That's why iLearn Reliability was created. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Please contact me if you have any questions or comments. Thanks very much.